Lauren, for the first time ever in the history of the Tech Bros, I can say Mary coming to you live from Paris. Opposite. Usually I'm to the west of you. Now I'm to the east of you.
You're
Got my
ahead of me
geography
now.
down. I'm so far ahead of you.
Getting
How's
in
it going,
wisdom,
bro?
in years, in experience,
Mm, all of it.
in
All of
spending
it.
time in
Uh,
France. You're way ahead.
Yes, yes. You're ahead in terms of what we're going to talk about. Because we haven't done a show in a while, we have a lot to talk about. So we are going to keep it focused on this wonderful company called Snowflake and some of your insights into that. But first, give us a quick catch up. How have you been, Lauren?
Doing great. Winding down my data consulting business. Have been getting into some trouble. I've been starting to do these things here in New York. Everyone loves fast casual restaurants. A lot of them are public. Some of them are not public. I've been doing tours of these fast
So
casual
funny.
places. Like, here's the difference between Chipotle. Here's Chipotle versus Kava. Here's Kava versus Naya. Here's how this all stuff works. So I did this a month ago, and I'm going to keep doing it more and more. We go in and we see how these restaurants are actually operating. Um, are their digital orders stacking up? Like, it's very competitive in New York, in Manhattan, the
Hmm.
casual lunch hour. And these, are multi-billion-dollar companies, and they're all kind of overvalued in the same way that software companies are overvalued. So I've been doing a few of those, and I'm going to formalize it and get a little bit more stuff together. So that's a lot of fun.
Are you charging for these tours?
Not yet. I will. I mean, I've had people who are like, "Yeah, take my junior analysts out there. Like, I'll pay you, blah blah blah." So yeah, we can get something together. I don't really. It's more about the fun of doing it, and yeah,
And the financial insights, yeah, the parallels between
yeah.
fast
No, it's
casual
really good.
dining and
Channel checks and seeing how these stores actually operate and things like that. And yeah, I mean, I've shifted what I'm doing around a bit, and yeah, excited to get into Snowflake and some of the other silliness
well,
we get into.
this show is not about fast casual dining today, so I will bring you back my notes and share those with you offline about my observations here in Paris, where fast casual dining seems to be like something inspired something for everything. So it's like Japanese inspired tacos or Cambodian inspired, Vietnamese egg rolls. It's some they're in a fusion phase, we'll say. But yeah, let's move on to the software world, even though we do have a question already about about fast casual. What are your feelings on
Naya is great.
Naya?
Naya is great for the category. I'm not a big fast casual fan, which is why I think it's so funny. But I know Jason. Jason's up in Westchester. Um,
We're going to
yeah,
hit a point in this episode where I'm not going to be sure if the questions are about fast casual dining or about software because I
we'll get off
think
fast casual.
the naming could be the nomenclature could be similar.
Yeah, well, it's dinner time in France or late afternoon, but I think here in the U.S. everyone's got lunch on their mind. But
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah.
let's
So
let's let's dive into it though. With Snowflake here, and you
give
know,
it obviously. Go ahead. Yeah. Let's start with the cybersecurity breach because not everyone has read your Twitter feed as thoroughly as I have. But give us a bit of the background on what's
yeah,
been
well,
going on with Snowflake.
yeah. So Snowflake's gone through a lot of problems here in the last month. They, did their conference a week. That was the first week in June, so about three and a half weeks back at this point. And they put out their announcements. Databricks, a competitor of theirs, obviously had their conference a week later, kind of owned them a little bit on some of the announcements,
Hmm.
or at least it looks like that. But the week before, Snowflake announced, um, after a news story broke, that they were having a lot of customer cyber security issues, and these have kept rolling out over the last month or so. And there's a lot of this is stuff that's in Bloomberg. It's in the financial press. It's kind of everywhere. Like, it's a
It's
known
been
thing.
verified. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been verified, and Snowflake's kind of been covering a lot of this stuff up, in my opinion, and being a little shady with the way they've been acting. And
Hmm.
we can go through a timeline of stuff and what happens, and we'll go through it in detail. But I mean, what happened here is a bunch of customers. Right now it's confirmed at 165, possibly more, but 165 customers had their accounts breached, hacked, gotten into by a third party, and then data was extracted. You've got your big table of users, you've got your big table of transactions, whatever's in there in your Snowflake, and just extracted it all out, and has been sold on the dark web. A lot of things like in
165 is huge, right? Like
165
that's
is a large
a,
number. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, this is not just one customer or two customers or whatever. This is, something that was targeted. Like Snowflake customers were targeted here. Because someone figured out that, like, hey, maybe these folks aren't very secure. Let's go see what we can find. Um, and figured that out. And like, there's a lot of things here that make this kind of unique from a cybersecurity perspective. One like really big one here, which we'll get into, is the consumption model. Like, as a lot of people
Mhm.
might know, Snowflake, like, you don't pay a flat fee for Snowflake, and that's the revenue. Like, you can buy your credits as a flat, charge or whatever. But
Package, yeah.
Snowflake recognizes their revenue based on consumption. So you can buy $1 million of credits or whatever amount over for a year or however long you think it's going to last you. But Snowflake only takes that revenue when the consumption is actually used, which is really
Mhm. So
interesting.
either the computing on your database. It's a Snowflake. For those who don't know, yeah, what Snowflake is.
What was that, Mary?
Or what? Just for people who don't know what Snowflake is, just the consumption of the compute on the
Yeah,
database,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So right. I mean, Snowflake's database company, right? Everybody, I
Mhm.
think, kind of knows that. Most of our audience is
Mhm.
data engineers and data
Mhm.
people, but and they've been around for over a decade, public company. But the point here is that, like, there's a lot of revenue um, that seems to have been generated from the hackers' usage of this, because and we'll get into a little bit of this in a few minutes here, but um, Google Cloud owns this organization that rolls up to it called Mandy, and Snowflake brought it in as a third party, group to look through everything that was going on with these Snowflake hacks. And they actually put out a lot of materials about what exactly happened with Snowflake, or what they know. And in each of these cases, and like, there's a lot of big names here. There's Santander
Mhm.
Bank, there's Lending Tree, a lot of loans. So two big financial names right there. There's the Los
Mhm.
Angeles School District. We can get into that one a little bit.
It's the second biggest public school district in the nation, over 500,000 people
Yeah, and
affected.
and
Yeah.
and this is something, LA school district, they've got 600,000 or so, mostly minors. I mean, pretty much everyone in the school district is under 18,
Mhm.
except for the, some of the
Staff.
seniors or whatever. And then a lot of them are under 13, and they're interacting with these web portals, where they take their tests and stuff, and this data is stored. And Snowflake has these use cases as well. And you can look this up, on their site. Let me share my screen real quick here, but let me go
It's part of their
to,
marketing. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Snowflake, and this is kind of the problem here, right? So we have these hackers who went in and targeted Snowflake accounts. What we know, and what Snowflake has said, is it started in April, from what they know.
Mhm.
It went on through May, seems to have stopped, and they cut it off by early June. And it seems like by the first week in June, Snowflake basically, if customers hadn't taken an action, they just kind of cut the account off. Is what Snowflake has said. But yeah, I mean, this went on for at least a month and a half or so. And yeah, I mean, Snowflake's party line here the whole time, like the story, the narrative, has kind of been, well, like, we did, and we went and we investigated, and we learned that, all these customers didn't have like an MFA, multi-factor authentication enabled. So, instead of just putting in a password, you have to do a second, like get it on your phone and get something
Mhm.
texted to you, or through an authenticator app or something like that. And there's a lot of questions here about, like, well, Snowflake didn't really enforce that. It was recommended, but these are customers who use the product anyways in the way that the product was meant to be used. And so Snowflake's telling this, in my opinion, this engineering story. Like, there's Snowflake the product, and then there's Snowflake
Mhm.
the company. And like, for a lot of engineers and engineering types, they'll say, yeah, well, you should have MFA enabled. It's 2024. Like, everyone's kind of had that for at least 2 or 3 years now, which is fairly true. But that's not really the Snowflake the business side, or Snowflake the stock side, or Snowflake, how they make money on their equity, their stock price and everything. That doesn't really tell that story. And when you have Snowflake out here, like, here's LA School District, and Snowflake's promoted this for a while as a
Mhm.
primary customer use case. Like, LA schools, they track students who are low income or get free lunches or stuff. How are their test scores compared to the group that's, not free lunches and low income? And if we track them over time, and we give the kids better breakfast and lunch and stuff, like, can we get their test scores up to a level at, where the other kids are performing, or how do we improve the student outcomes?
Mhm.
Okay, makes total sense. That's something, crunch the numbers on it, track it over time, use Snowflake for it. But Snowflake goes, and they're showing this off as a use case. Like, here, hey everybody, look, here's this good thing. We're helping low income kids in Los Angeles, like, get better outcomes, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
Here's a customer use case. This is a great customer use case. And then, oh well, actually they didn't have MFA turned on. It's the customer's fault now. So there's a little bit of a story here where, like, Snowflake's not really off the hook for a lot of this stuff, from a legal perspective, from
Mhm.
an opinion perspective, from things like that, by just claiming that the MFA story. Although, it's probably true. If you don't have MFA enabled, like, that's not a good thing.
But if
Uh,
that's happening across the board, that's a
yeah, and it's
they
happening
need
at
to have a
customers
stronger
that
reminder,
Snowflake has
turn your MFA
promoted.
on.
They're promoting
Mhm.
these as like ideal customer outcomes. So there's a
Yeah.
little bit of stuff here, and with the LA School District one specifically, there's this platform that students log into, and they can take their tests and their quizzes
Mhm.
and stuff. And so that's a web portal, and a lot
Sure.
of
Do
students,
not forget, my daughter is at
right,
LAUSD. I'm fully familiar with I signed in myself to see her grades and the test scores, and
right,
everything's in there. Yeah.
right.
It's terrifying that it's all out there.
Yeah, well, now it's out there on the dark web. So your daughter's
Mhm.
information is probably, I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't be, but
Mhm.
they got everything. So now some hacker out there, has your income and her medical data. There's medical data in there, and what was claimed to be stolen. There's test scores and stuff.
Oh, yeah,
And
all
like,
the
not only are these
IEPs,
minors,
the learning disabilities, all that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
right,
and
right,
things that
right.
can come back to haunt people later in life. Yeah.
Sure. And not only are these minors under 18, but there's actually laws about, like, under 13, which is called COPPA, um,
Mhm.
which protects, you may have seen on a bunch of websites, oh, you check the box that you're 13 or older or whatever. But, like, when you're putting information about minors, or minors inputting stuff into a web portal, and that data is being stored somewhere, there's pretty strict laws about that. Um, and it's, COPPA. If you're interested in reading about that, you can go read into it. The whole Silicon Valley TV show from a couple of years ago. They actually had a whole story arc about, like,
Prophetic. Yeah.
yeah, like, under 13-year-olds, like, going onto the social platform, and every time a stranger contacted them, that was a COPPA violation, which is, whatever it was at the time, a $10,000 fine or whatever. Uh, and then, the CEO in this TV show goes, oh, well, okay, $10,000, we'll just pay the fine, whatever. They're like, no, no, it's $10,000 for every person, and for every time it happened. So we're on the hook for $1 billion or whatever. And so my point with this, though, like not to make this about a stupid TV show, is that like there's a lot of stuff here that's not really been disclosed by Snowflake. And if you're someone in Los Angeles and you have kids in the system, you should be asking your school board, the school district, what's going on? What are you doing about this? What data was stolen from your Snowflake account? What liability do I have as a parent? And what are you doing about it? So there's a lot that needs to happen here. But to get back to the revenue piece here, like what I was mentioning earlier, is one of the biggest problems here with this is, and I've spoken with several customers and people who work for companies as an executive or CEO, founder of companies that experience this. And each time the story has been the same. And I'm not going to say their names or who they are, but I have spoken with several. I'm a well-known person in data engineering analytics world, and I ran a consultancy doing this for years. Each time, like what happened here with this timeline, and I'm going to share my screen here and go through this timeline here because this is really important.
Yeah, let's get it. I want to know how things played out, how Snowflake responded, and then we have a question from Saad about the getting more into the financial side. But
Yeah.
we'll get to that. We'll get to
Can
that.
you see my screen here? Is it sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Snowflake took Mandiant. Mandiant is a security company. They were independent, but now they're owned by Google Cloud, which is Snowflake's competitor, which is kind of interesting. Like that, Snowflake's biggest competitors are like Databricks and Google Cloud. Like Snowflake is kind of a partner of Google Cloud, but really they're more of a competitor. Snowflake on top of Google Cloud is a very small part of their business, but Snowflake versus Google Cloud is a much bigger part of their business. So it's kind of interesting that they have these people in here. But what they put out and what Mandiant put out as part of their joint statements about this, like April 14th, this was the earliest evidence of access to Snowflake customer instances. Earliest evidence of frostbite. There's a couple of things you might hear, like one's called rape flake, one's called frostbite.
And it's believed to be one hacker group, right? That's behind the.
Well, these aren't the hacker groups, but these are the programs and packages and such that they use.
Okay.
They're not the names of the groups. Like the name of the group here, as they're referring to it, and the name of the incident related to this group, UNC 5537 is what they are calling it. And none of this stuff's really standardized, by the way. This isn't like a government term necessarily or an FBI term. This is a term that like these guys made for this, by the way, if you want to know how all this cyber stuff works, but that's a different story. But April 19th, Mandiant begins investigating. May 14th, so 3 weeks later, about a month later, multiple impacted Snowflake customer instances. May 22nd, Mandiant, Google Cloud, notifies Snowflake and law enforcement of ongoing campaign targeting multiple customer Snowflake instances, which we now know is 165, as they've said, potentially more, but they know within this set of IP addresses, it's the 165. What I think is really interesting here, and what I think is a huge problem, is they know that this stuff was going on since mid-April. So these hackers went in, and Mandiant also put out this other guide here about here's what the hackers did. Here's the queries that we saw patterns of them running. And they basically went in and they just select star, which in SQL is like everything out of the table, extract it out. And in several cases, and you can look at this document, if you go to, just look at Mandiant Snowflake, and they have their report here, and then they have their guide to the queries that were run and things that happened. In several cases, like they saw the hackers going in over multiple days. So not only are these people going in these third parties going in like once and grabbing everything and getting out.
Mm-hmm.
In at least several cases, like they're not putting a number on how many it was. Maybe it was everybody. Maybe it was a few. I don't know. But like people went in multiple times and started grabbing stuff. And the way Snowflake works, when you're select all, select starring everything, and you want to get stuff out of there as quickly as possible, like you're jumping up the consumption that's being used. Like Snowflake,
Dramatically, yeah.
right, dramatically in some cases. And folks that I've spoken with, they all have said that, like, yes, we went in and we looked, and yeah, we burned through half our credits for the year. We burned through most of our credits for the year.
So that wasn't the robber coming in and grabbing a diamond. He was grabbing, or he or she, hackers could be male or female, grabbing the big sacks of diamonds. Like there was a noticeable impact.
Yeah, and like I don't really think so. Like I don't really think the hacker would care like how much revenue they're making for Snowflake. They're just going to go in and grab what they can to like extort it. But
it wasn't
the
discreet.
question of this is because of Snowflake's revenue model, that Snowflake actually makes money off of this. Like every time you're jumping up that consumption and going in there and pulling stuff out, and some of this happened over several days. So it's not just one-time grabs. It's confirmed by Mandiant that in at least some of these cases, people were going in again and again and grabbing stuff, because data, as it grows over time, all right, the next day's stuff came in, the next days or the next milliseconds or whatever came in. So they in a lot of these cases, they were in there for a bit and jumping up this consumption. And, maybe companies that don't put MFA in are a little bit more likely to not be paying that close attention to their Snowflake bills. Maybe that's probably kind of true. Probably true. But yeah, I mean, Snowflake made money off of this last quarter, this quarter. These people ran, these third-party bad actors or whatever you want to call them, ran this stuff, and Snowflake took credit for that. And they beat, their last quarter. It started in April. Snowflake's quarters run, their last quarter ran February, March, April. They're offset by a month. And now they're in a new quarter, which they haven't reported yet because it's not over yet. So stuff was going on.
We have a bunch of questions. We'll get to some of not all, but we'll get to some. But Vivek, I think what you're getting at, Lauren, Vivek summed up the question that I think probably a lot of people are asking is the big question is, did Snowflake know about the hack and let it continue because the data extraction was boosting revenue?
Well, look, I mean, I've spoken with several customers and who experienced this, and these are executives and people who run businesses. They're not even necessarily that close to Snowflake. I haven't spoken to LendingTree or any of the big household names, but some smaller customers. And every single time they said that, like, what happened is Snowflake at some point around here in May, this is when the news story broke, May 29th, May 30th. That's when like news outlets started posting about this because it became obvious because these things were getting posted on the dark web. They're trying to extort customers. They try to get Snowflake to pay, it seems. They tried to get customers to pay. And then when they didn't, they started posting it online. There's another kind of weird story that came out from this group Hudson Rock. I don't really know what that was, but that came out May 29th. So this is when all the news stories broke, right? Like May 29th, May 30th. And that's when Snowflake started to come clean. Now, Snowflake reported on their quarter that ended at the end of April. And, they did their call, big Wall Street event, like you announce your quarter, you announce your year, you do your call, you put out your documents. Here's our profitability. Here's our earnings, blah, blah, blah. They put that out on May 22nd, and they announced this stuff ahead of time. Like, they announced all these large public companies announce a couple weeks in advance, hey, we're going to have our earnings call. It's this day. It's at 5:00 after the market closes, blah, blah, blah. Join us on the call, blah, blah, blah. Right. And so they planned this out already. So I want to know why Mandiant is in here since April 19th. And on May 22nd, literally the day that their new CEO, Sridhar Ramaswamy, and the CFO, Mike Scarapelli, are going to go and talk to Wall Street and talk to investors, that is the specific day that Mandiant notified Snowflake, right? Not a day before, not a couple weeks before, not knowing this was going on here in May, in early May. Why was it specifically that day? And it's the day of the earnings call, because if you report it that day, then, you've got a little bit of plausible deniability. Like, oh, well, how could we report on this and include this in the report if we only learned about it today or whatever, which is reasonable. You can't turn something around in an hour that's that significant or whatever. So, a lot of stuff here is pretty bad. There's also a couple of their executives sold some stock right around May 24th here. So they knew there was a problem. They knew that, this was going to be negative news for Snowflake. Their chief accounting officer, Emily Ho, and these are all public documents. You can look these up on Snowflake's investor relations portal. You can look at the SEC, Edgar, it's called. All public companies put their documents out there, all public news. She sold a bunch of stock. The executive here who's in charge of reporting on this stuff as their chief accounting officer on May 24th here, right? And that's when the documents went out. So they already knew about this, and the stock price didn't really start crashing down until, May 30th, June, and it's, been down since. And there's a lot of stuff here that's, really poor about this. With the people I've spoken with who were impacted by this, and these aren't necessarily data engineers, but they're people who run companies that use Snowflake or have run it. They're all beyond livid, because what happened here, and this is on several people that I've spoken with, they weren't really notified about all of this until right around here, towards this week in May, right? And what Snowflake did in a lot of these cases is, they were out here saying, we've contacted our customers, we've told them there's an issue, we're working with them, blah, blah, blah. But none of the executives that I've spoken with felt they were properly contacted. And what I mean by that is their names are on the contract. There's point of contact, chief executive officer, chief financial officer, chief, the people who pay the bills, the people who are on the contract. Snowflake has in their, I don't know what they use. I think they use Salesforce, but whatever their CRM is, each of these accounts is going to say who's the person we call up when it's time to renew? Who's the person who, if we have a contract thing, who do we call up? If there's a problem, who do we call? It's not the 25-year-old, junior data engineer. It's the, it's the CEO or whatever, or whoever is the point of contact. And so a lot of what Snowflake did here is they were out telling a story about we contacted our customers and blah, blah, blah. In none of these cases, based on,
have they been properly contacted?
Did people feel they were properly told about all this? And then when they went and looked in to what happened, it turns out, hey, we burned through an extra 30,000, 50,000, whatever in credits that they burned up. And so they're all going to fight back now and try and get their money back. And I think they should get their money back. And
of course, yeah.
And if Snowflake can't do that, then it's time to go move over to Databricks, or it's time to move over to Google Cloud, and it's time to move over to whatever, because this is nonsense.
Is that sort of that's not what you're seeing happening? Yeah, this is too much sort of in the immediate, people kind of scrambling to figure out what to do with the situation. Yeah.
So I'll put a pause on it there. We have a few questions here, but I'll just read them. Some people show up as their name. Some people show up as LinkedIn user or YouTube user. But so Akila Mir asks, I have a question for Snowflake users and how it works. What % of compute is related to transformation versus actual analytics queries on average for a given customer? That's a good question. It depends on the account. And to be clear, there's consumption, which is what you pay, and then there's storage and compute. And so you can pay for storage, you can pay for compute. Snowflake makes all of their margin on compute. They make not a ton of margin on storage. So like
It's very cheap.
it's both revenue, but it's more profitable as the compute. Just to clear that up for anyone who may have questions. It depends on the customer. Like, a lot of the stuff that's like ELT or ETL, like, do we transform stuff in Informatica or whatever and then put it into Snowflake to serve for Tableau or Looker or whatever? That's one way of doing it. That would like lower Snowflake costs, even though you're paying for the transform somewhere else. Like Snowflake wants you to do everything in Snowflake, obviously, and then every other vendor wants you to do everything in there. But it really depends. Like as a best practice, what I've guided customers to in running my firm over a couple of years is to like never spend more than like 30 to 40% of your overall costs
Transformation.
on this transformation stuff, like in Snowflake, where it's more expensive and it's more variable than when you can get it kind of flat somewhere else. Again, it really doesn't matter for the very smallest customers. You're kind of optimizing something that doesn't really need to be optimized, but for big customers, it definitely matters. Other companies like,
Franco, I don't know where Franco works, but he says
Lauren.
Franco says he sees 70-30, 70 ETL, so transformation.
Yeah,
Depending on the use case.
It depends on everything. It depends on what you're doing. I mean, Franco, I think, is at Databricks, and that's a Spark heavy type thing. So it depends on the technologies. So a couple more questions here.
Let's scroll back up to some of the higher ones. We did have El Ganucci who asked your thoughts on the annual Snowflake conference happening in the middle of this conundrum. But the reality is that conference would have been scheduled out a year ahead of time. So that was just maybe a nice distraction from Snowflake's standpoint. They got to focus on the polar bears and all the crazy stuff they have happening at Snowflake conferences and not have to talk about this stuff. Lauren, you and I first met at a Snowflake conference in person. We knew each other already virtually, but our first IRL meeting was at not Snowflake. Let's see, it wasn't this year, 2 years prior to that. So 2022.
Yeah, now if I go, they'd shoot me.
Yeah, I think last year they were probably sort of semi-threatening too. But yeah, let's scroll up to some of the higher questions up here.
Yeah, I mean, 165 customers out of 9,000. Do you think that impacts revenue? Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's the big question. And that's from Saad. I mean, that's the big question here, right? Like, and you're looking at there's a couple ways to look at this. Like Snowflake has always been a growth stock. It's not that like, here's $1 million out of the 300 million they made in a quarter. It's that they put out their quarterly beats and raises, and they put out their forecast, and they want to beat and they raise it. And so they're going to put out a little window of, we think we're going to make this much money this quarter and this year, right? And that's how all these companies kind of work. And here's how we get to this number for this year. And these are all on thin margins of this type of stuff. So even with 165 customers, I mean, there are big names in there. I mean, you've got Santander Bank, you've got Lending Tree, you've got a couple other companies. Like it's very easy.
Advanced Auto Parts, somebody said.
Yeah, Advanced Auto Parts is in there. And then Neiman Marcus was just named. Neiman Marcus is an interesting one because Neiman Marcus says it was like 60,000 customers had their data stolen, even though the transactions are, it's not one-to-one transactions because customers make multiple transactions. But Neiman says it's 60,000 customers. The hacker says, no, we actually have data on millions of customers. I don't know. That's what's going on this week with this stuff. But I mean, look, like, I don't think that, this is something that Snowflake, like, people like to push back on me and say that, like, well, Microsoft gets hacked and this stuff happens, or, this other company like Amazon has stuff. Like these are all orders of magnitude larger than Snowflake. And they're also much more deep products. Like Amazon has a whole e-commerce business, and, they have their advertising business that's attached to the e-commerce business. And then they have AWS, and logistics stuff and blah blah blah. Like they're a huge. Oh, sorry, I think I
Sorry,
went back for a second.
sorry. Yeah, I
Yeah, I mean,
appreciate you out. Whoops.
when it comes down to materiality, I mean, that's on Snowflake's team to communicate. That's on their CFO, Mike Scarpelli. That's on their chief accounting officer, Emily Ho, and that's on their CEO, Sridhar Ramaswamy, to go ahead and make that clear. And what they've said, it came up in a Bloomberg article that the chief information security officer, a guy named Brad Jones, says, well, it's not very material and blah, blah, blah. But then a day later, Mandiant put this thing out again that said, well, here's all the queries that were run, and some of this happened over multiple days. So, there's a lot that's a little bit murky about this. And I think if Snowflake's going to take themselves seriously, they need to reassure investors like what the dollar amount is. And the other problem here is that like customers are asking for their money back, and as they rightfully should. And if Snowflake knew about this and didn't really contact you the right way, or they contacted your junior employees but not the person who's paying the bills, to kind of like give themselves a couple of days of buffer or whatever that was, that looks a little murky, and you should give the money back. I mean, otherwise you're going to lose the customer. You're going to lose some of them. Like it's bad business to do this. So
let's bring in this perspective. It's a bit of a long comment that I'm going to read. It's from, we don't say his name here, but it's Chris. I was able to find it over on LinkedIn. So he says, Lauren, you've been relatively outspoken about missteps that Snowflake has taken. I personally don't necessarily disagree or agree, but it's difficult to manage the messaging around these kinds of breaches. To me, this is equivalent to back in the mid-10s when S3 breaches were happening almost daily because AWS S3 customers didn't have appropriate controls around their buckets, even though those controls were available to them. How, in your mind, is this security incident different than that? I think you're going to say that it's quite different.
It's similar. I mean, it's similar in the sense that like, I'm looking at this as a business problem, and like Snowflake has sold, like all these cloud companies make their money. They make the most money. Like, let's just call it elephant in the room. Like Snowflake, let's look at them for a minute. Like they have a bunch of enterprise customers. They put out their number of Fortune or Forbes 2000 global customers. So the biggest according to Forbes, 2,000 customers in the world. And here's how many of them Snowflake's penetrated. Blah blah blah. They make most of their money not off of these mature or whatever companies with the best procurements teams and the most stodgy security. They make most of their money off of these Yahoo tech companies. Not Yahoo the tech company, but these
the cuckoo
cowboy hat, get the growth going. And AWS was like that too. Even though AWS has expanded a lot.
Matured, yeah.
And a lot of this stuff is, if you're out there promoting directly to customers and you're promoting directly, like, I don't know, one thing I've talked about a lot, and Mary, you and I have kind of laughed, and even when we were meeting for the first time like 2 years ago, we would kind of laugh at like, why are all these like 40-year-old like nerdy computer guys just like preying on these 24-year-olds? Not preying on necessarily, but like, well, the answer is because like on this compute model, they want as many junior people as possible going ham. And that's kind of the way it works. Like the more
incompetent,
the more like goofing off,
technology,
like a credit card. Like, yeah, I mean, like if you're an 18-year-old with a credit card, you're probably going to be more irresponsible than a 25-year-old with a credit card on average, versus a 30-year-old with a credit card versus a 40-year-old who has, a kid and a mortgage, whatever, and has their, life in order a bit more. Like it's all about like, marketing to like how these companies go to market and who they are trying to get as their customers. And if you're a credit card company and you're like selling to immigrants who don't speak the language necessarily, like, or you're marketing at teenagers or like people who aren't, like, you're kind of seen as a little bit sketchy, right? Like, and like there's all these like little weird financial products that people sell, usually targeted at immigrants or people who don't have their lives together, or people who move to a new country and don't necessarily know the law,
Aren't in the
languages.
know for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, right. And like every financial scam, like, kind of has this type of stuff. And these are the most valuable customers until they default for, like, the credit cards, or not the card itself, but like whoever's
Startups go belly
interest
up.
on. And then all this stuff is about interest. It's all like getting interest on it. And so, you go make all this crazy stuff in the cloud or whatever, you're paying interest on it over time again and again. And so I'm kind of answering this in a roundabout way, but like to just tie it back here, I would look at this as like the business problem of, like, if you're going out here and marketing to people who may not be the most sophisticated or may not be the most experienced or whatever, you also have to, like, and you're making money off of that. There's also a downside to it because they're riskier customers. Like, you make money off of selling to riskier and riskier people or organizations or whatever. There's another side to it. And that's, when the cows come home to roost, or the chickens come home to roost. I don't think cows roost, but, and that's how I'd explain it. Like, and MongoDB has done this. AWS has kind of done this. Snowflake definitely does it. dbt definitely does it. Like, a bunch of these companies do it. Like, especially when there's some kind of consumption or usage element, even remotely involved, then it always happens. So, there's like a lot of customers need to be thinking about, do I have the appropriate, like, guardrails on? Like, maybe it's time to put like some guardrails in for, the data engineering team, or, maybe like certain people aren't allowed to do certain things. And yeah, we better actually take security seriously. So that's all happening right now. And this is
So
push.
there's lots of elements to this story, but the top line for you of the story, is it a cybersecurity / data governance story, or a corporate mishandling, misbehavior story? Or, which is the bigger issue is that, right? That's sort of
I think the biggest story here is that 500,000 LA County miners had their data stolen. And Snowflake's promoting this. That's the biggest story of all this.
Yeah. No, I'd forgotten that there was this personal connection to it, but I should have.
You're a little.
Tweeted this out to my fellow parents.
You're a little grainy, Mary, on the thing, but I'll do so. Some people have questions about Iceberg here as well, and so just shifting away from the cyber stuff for a minute. Like, I'll do the Iceberg piece here. So
can you hear me okay though, Lauren? Is it just
I can hear you? Yeah, you're coming in a little for me. I don't know if the audience hears it, but so on Iceberg here, here's the big news, right? Like, earlier this month, Snowflake, it was on Monday, I believe Monday, June 3rd, or that Monday, Snowflake announced that they're putting out Polaris, which is going to be this metadata catalog that's going to be used in tandem with Iceberg. The next day, Databricks announced they bought Tabular, the company that was founded by the folks, this guy Ryan Blue and his partners there, who run the Apache Iceberg open source project. So the way these things kind of work is that there's always like a company that's generally affiliated with these Apache projects, and where Apache is like open source, and good of the community and blah blah blah, what have you, and you can have your opinions about how that works and how it doesn't work or whatever. Sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't, but they always have an affiliated company like Confluent. Jay Krebs, he was at LinkedIn. The company is Confluent. They're a public company now. The project in Apache is Kafka, right? And like that's how that started a couple of years ago. And so a lot of these will have Apache stuff will have an affiliated company with them. That's usually the people are what's called PMCs in Apache, like the people running the project. And those are usually the people who are like the founder, the CTO of the affiliated companies. But when Databricks bought this, it kind of threw a wrench in things to the public for Snowflake. Snowflake has, for a couple of years, like kind of teased what they're going to do. And I'll just share some examples here. 1 second. Like for a couple of years, Snowflake has put out all this stuff about all the stuff they're doing with Iceberg and Iceberg this and Iceberg that and blah, blah, blah. And they never really delivered on much of anything. They put their Iceberg tables product out into GA. So it's, available now. They put that out on June 10th. That's 18 days ago. That's a week after all this stuff happened at the beginning of the month. So they've been in no rush to put out Iceberg. They've talked about it for years. Like we can look at Snowflake's like blog, and we can look at like, if you go back to like 2 years ago to their conference, like they're talking about it, and they're always, here's all the stuff we do for Iceberg and this and that. Darn it, 1 second here. I'm going to go share screen.
Do present, yeah.
StreamYard's a little off today, but I mean, like this stuff goes back. Like here's Snowflake. This is August of 2022. Iceberg tables, open standards with Snowflake innovations. And then this gets shared around, and then it gets shared around on LinkedIn, and Twitter, and Reddit. They're all Snowflake's going to have open this, that, and the other. And this is 22nd of August, or August 8th, 2022. Excuse me. And there's a bunch of other examples of like, last year in 2023, they had a whole thing at their conference. Here's what we're doing with Iceberg and Iceberg this and that. And it kind of goes nowhere. I mean, if we just go here, right? Like this is from January. This is from 2.5 years ago, expanding the data cloud with Apache Iceberg, right? And it's all this, we're in private preview, which means like it's not generally available. You have to be in a specific cloud region, and there's a little bit of limitations on it. Like not any Snowflake customer can use it.
And in beta, yeah.
Yeah, right. And you can think about it like that if you're not familiar with this terminology. But this is, July 11th in July and blah, blah, blah. And then, only 3 weeks ago did they actually push this out. And if we look at, let me stop sharing for 1 second and then pull up a new one. They've also put out this Polaris thing, which that will compete. I mean, let's just call it what it is.
The tabular.
Well, yeah. No. This is Polaris, and this is what's going to compete with Databricks' Unity catalog. It's a direct competitor to it, and Unity's been around. It's a thing. It exists. And Snowflake put this out, and they did a big announcement about it. Oh, in 90 days, we're going to have this out. And they put this out, I think it was June 3rd, that first Monday of their conference. We're going to put out Polaris, and we're going to compete with Databricks' Unity and whatever. And so they put this out. This is if you're not familiar, this is like a GitLab or GitHub, repo. And so this is where they're going to put out their code and everything and blah, blah, blah. They didn't put anything out there. They put out a picture and they put out like an intro to it, and it's now coming in 90 days. And, they had a big thing out there and at the conference, up on stage, the guys up there in blazers. Oh yeah, it's going to be great, blah, blah, blah. This is what it is right now. And so I actually couldn't believe that they actually were bold enough to do this. I mean, a lot of tech companies get a little ahead of their skis in terms of what they promise on timeline of delivery. But they just
Hmm.
these guys at Snowflake, they just put out a blank repo. Watch this repo, star the repo, read the announcement, and then someone opens up an issue. I don't know if they're being funny or serious. I don't know who this is. Hey, congrats. Where's the code in the issues?
That's
Hope to
great.
see the code
Oh.
ace. I have no idea who this person is, or if they're being serious or just kind of ribbing Snowflake a little bit. I don't know. But
Was that you,
it's
Lauren? Was that one of your aliases?
no, no, no.
Don't
This
have the
is
time.
I don't know. This is some founder of some, but whoever it is. I don't know who the person is. Some people have forked it. I'm not logged in here on this, but
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. There's nothing there, and so this is the kind of thing that, like, when you go to these conferences, what's the smoke and mirrors and what's real and not, and I'm not going to sit here and be a Databricks homer or anything. I don't have any financial or relationship with that company, Databricks, but, like,
Mhm.
I don't know, they have something that exists and it's existed for years, and
That's
it's
where
out
the
there.
bar is. They have something that exists.
Yeah, that's
Isn't
where the
that
bar is,
astonishing?
right? Right. And
Hmm.
Snowflake has a picture in a repo.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so and let's get down to, like, why this is, right? Like Iceberg is, if Snowflake actually delivers on Iceberg and Iceberg related stuff, and it's
Hmm.
adopted by some of their bigger customers, the people who pay them millions of dollars a
Yeah.
year. Not the $30,000, $50,000 accounts, but, like, the big ones. If it's actually used, these accounts are generally going to see their annual spend go down. So Snowflake's going to make less money off them. And maybe someone's making, and the reason why is, like, um, moves around the idea of where storage and compute happens and the way this works. And Snowflake, like, a lot of times right now, Snowflake, a lot of customers, people will just dump stuff into Snowflake, just dump
Hmm.
it in. It could be, I don't want to get into this structured versus unstructured and whatever, like, but, like, people will just dump stuff into Snowflake, transform their way out of it and prepare it in Snowflake, and then set it up for ML or for business intelligence dashboards or whatever. And Snowflake likes that, like, because you're putting, you're using their CPU cycles, which is what they charge you for, to compute your way out of that. Now, doing this in a way that cleans this up and formats it a little bit is going to totally put a wrench in those customers if they adopt Iceberg or a similar format. Um,
Hmm.
if they adopt this, then they'll be paying Snowflake less. So Snowflake has kind of done this thing for 2 years where it's like, will they or won't they? Are they going to deliver on this or are they not? So they've just kind of sat on this for 2 years while telling the market and people that they're delivering this Iceberg
It's
stuff,
coming.
this
Hmm.
open table, and they haven't done any. They pushed it out to GA on June 10th. And I would encourage anyone, data engineering folks who are thinking about this or looking at it, like, you can also just use, like, the Iceberg stuff in the way that the Apache Iceberg project calls it. Like, Snowflake has a history of, and it's their financial incentives and it's how they act, and that's the way it is. But, like, I would look at how slow Iceberg tables is versus what you can do with Iceberg if you're really committed to Iceberg. Um, like, I don't know what your use cases are. It depends on your company, but, like, do a compare and contrast between what Snowflake's offering on their Iceberg tables offering, which they put out a few weeks ago, versus what you can
Hmm.
just do with Iceberg in general. If
Open
that's
source.
important,
Yeah.
I don't think it's important to most customers. Frankly, I think the whole thing is
Hmm.
kind of a little goofy. 90%, 80% of customers probably don't even need to care about this. But if it's important to you, I would definitely do that A/B test and see what Snowflake and if Snowflake's slowing it down a little bit. Because if they're slowing stuff down, you're going to see costs reflected elsewhere. And, you should be, if you're a good solid data engineer, who cares about these vendors? The vendors don't pay your paycheck. Your employer pays your paycheck. So do right by them and pick the best solution. So go in and A/B test stuff and see what works.
Lauren, we only have 5 minutes because I have a meeting with my real job, top of the hour. But as probably do you, or at one of your real jobs. But I just I'll give you the last word because you've had most of the words here because you know this stuff. And but for anyone who's wondering why did we just do an hour on Snowflake? I mean the essence of this show from the beginning is call out what needs to be called out and what other people aren't calling out. And again, yes, now some other folks, including up to the levels of like Bloomberg, are calling out the Snowflake stuff. But you've been doing it for a long time, and we'll do it with anyone. If Databricks has anything equivalent to be called out, we'll talk about it, or anyone else, right? I mean, it's not.
Yeah, right, right.
This isn't an hour of bash Snowflake. It's an hour of call out the silliness and on the one level the silliness all the way up to or down to the scamminess and everything in between, right?
Yeah, and I think just to put a pin in it here, and thanks everyone for chiming in. There's I know people who are watching this for investing reasons, and I know there are people who are watching this for like customer reasons. But like to the customer group, like if Snowflake, if you burned all your credits on this ordeal, or you're, it doesn't matter, you're a data engineer, you're a CEO of a company, and this happened at your company, and now you're wondering what's going on, like you need to get your money back from these, or at least get the credit back from Snowflake for this. And you should push them. And if they're gonna give you a little bit of flim flam, or same with any other company, give you some flim flam for this type of stuff, you can look elsewhere. There are plenty of other companies that offer competitive solutions versus Snowflake. And I know people don't like to talk about their companies getting data breached, so this is kind of always kept quiet. But like there are other people out there who have experienced this type of thing, and push them. And if you want a name of a lawyer or lawyers, you can email me.
Or of a 12-step program.
Yeah. You get your money back. Like this is a bunch of baloney. So get your money back,
there's
and
options. And as we move into an AI first world, there's better options than Snowflake, right?
Yeah, I guess I mean there's plenty of options for things out there. Or you can just go back to Microsoft Excel. Whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, Excel all the way. That's who we want as a sponsor. Awesome. Okay, we'll sign off then, everybody. We did not get to all the questions, but that just means you have to tune in next time and ask them again. Otherwise, keep an eye on, I guess, my LinkedIn feed. I don't care if you do or not. Keep an eye on Lauren's Twitter feed because it's fun. And we'll see you all next time.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.